All right. Well, we will, I guess we can go ahead and get started. I'm already recording. That's great. Okay. Well, welcome. We are super glad you all are here. We have already said this, but if you haven't,
I didn't understand.
Siri. If you haven't already done it, please introduce yourself in the chat with your name and organization. I also asked to put sort of your level of Farm Bill. So if you're a Farm Bill newbie, if you have some experience with the Farm Bill, that sort of thing. Please mute yourself. If you forget to mute yourself and you begin doing something else, we will very kindly mute you for you. If you have a question, use the chat or raise your hand, which is in the reactions at the bottom. We'll have time for Q&A, and the chat is open and will be monitored. So please feel free to use the chat if you have a question. We have a small group today, so feel free to keep the chat active and ask any questions that you have, because I'm sure you're not the only one. And again, we are recording this so that we can share it widely. All right, Haley, next slide. Okay, so the Farm Bill. What is the Farm Bill? The Farm Bill really should be called the Food and Farm Bill, in my opinion. It is massive. It is an omnibus, which means, so it is an omnibus. It is a multi-year authorizing legislation that governs an array of food and farm programs. And an omnibus just means it's a bill that contains lots of different areas of legislation. So it's like they put a bunch of different bills into one. Great. So like I said, the Farm Bill is huge. It is renewed every 5 years. And the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, updates and adjusts the projections of spending on these titles, which we'll talk about annually. The last Farm Bill was enacted in 2018, which means that the next Farm Bill is now. It expires actually in September of this year. Usually we'd have a draft and we'd be deep in the reading of it and the drafts would be going back and forth. We have not yet, and we'll learn about why pretty soon. So the total for the 2018 Farm Bill was projected at $428 billion with a B. They have since changed. The Congressional Budget Office has changed what their projection is for the next Farm Bill, and we'll talk about that in a few slides, but it's in the trillions now. And the nutrition title, which is mostly SNAP covered in that, is 76% of that. So that is a huge piece of it. So though it's called the Farm Bill, it is not just about farming. It is also about nutrition and hunger. As you can see, it's mostly about that. So what is in the Farm Bill? Oh, I wrote SNAP twice. Sorry about that. What's in it? SNAP is in it. That's the biggest piece of it. And SNAP, I'm sorry, is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is formerly known as food stamps. So that is the largest piece of it. I put school food eligibility, and I say that because while school food isn't in it, explicitly funding for school food isn't in it, the way that many schools and school districts and families become eligible for free or reduced cost meals is through SNAP. So if you are eligible for SNAP, you are automatically eligible for free or reduced lunch. Schools and school districts that have a certain percentage, right now it's 50% plus one of students who are on SNAP and are eligible for free or reduced lunch. It means the whole district is eligible, or the whole school and or district is eligible for free school meals. So while school food itself isn't in it, the eligibility is impacted very much by the Farm Bill. Emergency feeding programs are in it, nutrition incentive programs like a farmer's market match. And there is a lot of farming, conservation, local food systems are funded through this, commodities, and more. Now, what isn't in it? Like I said, the school food funding isn't in it. The Child and Adult Care Feeding Program, which is known as CACFP, and that is what is used for food at early care centers, so like Head Start 0 to 5 and senior centers. WIC is not in it. Farm and food worker rights are not in it. Water rights, a lot of land stuff, so like grazing rights, that kind of thing, are not in the Farm Bill. So the Farm Bill is divided into what they call chapters. And the chapters normally don't change, but they could. So these are the chapters that were there from 2018. But you can see, while nutrition is just one piece, it makes up, that should not say nearly 20%. That should say nearly 80%. I got my percents mixed up, so we'll change that. Nutrition makes up nearly 80% of Farm Bill spending, even though it's just one chapter within it. Okay, so how is it passed? This is where we get into the muckety muck, as I call it. So there's 3 phases of getting it passed. There is the actual bill passage, which is what we call the reauthorization phase. So that is the bill text. That is what is passed. That is all the stuff that they say they're going to do or not going to do. That's the reauthorization phase. Appropriations phase is the money part. So how are we going to pay for all the things that are in the Farm Bill and all the things we said we were going to do? And then the third phase is what's called the rulemaking phase, and that's the implementation phase. So how are we going to spend the money and do all of the things that we said we were going to do in the way that it was intended to be done, and in an equitable way? So each of these phases is equally as important as the other ones. A lot of people think once it's passed, we're done. But once it's passed, we have to make sure that money is appropriately appropriated to things, and then that they actually make the rules and implement it in the way that it was designed. So to get a little bit more deep into the reauthorization phase, it's very messy, I'll say that. So it has to go to, it goes through the Senate and the House. And each step has to go to both. So the first step is where hearings are held for the general public to provide input regarding what they'd like to see in the upcoming Farm Bill. That happened over a year ago. We've been in these hearings. We are now in step 2, where the House and Senate Ag committees are creating their own separate drafts of the Farm Bill. Once they have created and released those drafts, it will be amended and voted on by each respective committee. After that, the committees present them to the floor. So the House committee will present it on the House floor to be discussed and voted on. Once that happens, and they do all of their negotiating within each floor, then they each have their own bill that has passed, and it's sent to a joint conference committee. So people from the House, people from the Senate, usually from the Ag committees, will work together to condense those 2 bills into one, because it has to end up being one bill. The combined bill is then brought back to the House and Senate floors for a vote. That's another place for it to potentially be derailed, or significantly changed. Then once it goes through all of that, passes the House and Senate floors, it is then sent to the president, where they can choose to veto it or sign it into law. So as you can see, there's so much back and forth that what the draft looks like when it's released, which we should be seeing soon, can look vastly different from what is sent to the president, because it has to do so much back and forth and negotiating. And that's where things that feel like, well, how did they get that in there? It gets in there during all of this negotiating. And so, like I said, from there, so they have a bill, they sent it to the president. We will say the president has signed it. Great, we have a signed Farm Bill. How are we going to pay for all of these programs? How are we going to make sure that we pay for SNAP? How are we going to make sure that we pay for rural development and research that we want to do on climate change for farmers or something? So the first step is for the president to send a budget to Congress. Then the House and Senate Ag committees are responsible for setting funding levels. Just yesterday, maybe the day before, the House Ag Committee released their funding levels, and it was very low. It went back to 2006 levels. And so that now the Senate has to also release their draft of the funding levels. And then it goes through the same thing. Each House drafts their own, then they have to get it voted on, then they have to come together, then they have to separate again to get it voted on, and then they hopefully get one last vote where they will decide on what the appropriation is for the Farm Bill before sending it once again to the president to sign. Now, there is what's called mandatory and discretionary funding. Mandatory funding means that this has to be funded. It has to be funded. End of story. And so the things that are mandatory are nutrition. So SNAP is mandatory. It has to be funded. Farm commodities, crop insurance is funded. And then there's 1%, which is more of the rural development, the research, the farm credit, those sorts of things. And while we're saying 1% like it's nothing, 1% of 1.5 trillion is a number I can't even think of off the top of my head because it's very, very big. Oh, hold on. Can you go back 2 more? Okay, that's good. Yes. And so, because so the budget is set, so they have to fund the mandatory thing. So really what they're looking at when they are setting the budget is how much the mandatory stuff is going to cost. And that's where they really count on the Congressional Budget Office to give them an estimate of what they think things are going to cost. And then everything else gets funded from there. Especially all the discretionary stuff is kind of like what's left. Okay, so we've gotten it passed. We've gotten the money. What happens after that? Now, the USDA, which is an executive agency, is responsible for determining how these programs are implemented. Now, it is a 5-year, the Farm Bill is 5 years, so it's a lot of hurry up and wait. For instance, the Thrifty Food Plan, in the 2018 Farm Bill, they said that it would be updated. Well, it just happened in 2021, and they're doing it again now. So it did not happen immediately after it was passed. Hemp reclassification, which was like a very big thing in the 2018 Farm Bill, some of that happened immediately. And some of it took lots and lots of hearings and is still just now happening. So they have the full 5 years in which to enact everything that they've said. And so there's still a lot of advocacy that's needed to, 1, sort of get things moving, and 2, make sure that they are moving in a way that is equitable and in the way that is intended. So if we say we want to update the Thrifty Food Plan, for instance, and they say, great, and then they come back and say, actually, you only need $20 per person per day. We all know that's incorrect. So we have to make sure that, and to be clear, I'm not saying they'll do that. That was just an absurd example. But we have to make sure that we are watching and making sure that, the intent is to make sure that families have enough food to eat, not to somehow take it out of there, especially if we're looking at the Thrifty Food Plan. So making sure that everything is implemented in an equitable way. I'm going to stop for just a second and see if people have questions on what we've gone over thus far, because that was a lot of information. Anybody? Oh, okay. So a marker bills are really important for the Farm Bill. And a marker bill is a standalone piece of legislation that's never actually intended to pass on its own, but is intended to gather support and then be incorporated into a larger bill, such as the Farm Bill. It is hard to know what a marker bill is without having people kind of on the inside to say like, hey, this is just a marker bill, because it's introduced like any other bill, but it's usually introduced around the time of the Farm Bill and has things that are very timely for the Farm Bill or that people are interested in. So some of the current marker bills that we are watching are the Healthy Kids Help Kids Learn Act. And that is to increase the amount of school food reimbursements that are available for students. There's the Improving Access to Nutrition Act, and that is, sorry, there's so many of them. That one is trying to waive the 3 months time limit on SNAP for able-bodied adults without dependents. There's the SNAP Access for Medically Vulnerable Children Act, and that is looking at medical deductions in children and making sure that if kids have more deductions than the $35 standard deduction, those can be taken. There's the Puerto Rican Nutrition Assistance Fairness Act, and that is, so it is not well known that Puerto Rico does not have access to SNAP like the rest of the United States. In fact, they have what's called a block grant. So they are given a certain amount of money that they can use for SNAP. And once that money is out, it's out. So it's not mandatory funding. So they do not get SNAP like the rest of the US does. And so there's a big move to add them to the larger SNAP system. And then there's Healthy School Meals for All movement. That's not necessarily a marker bill, although some of these marker bills have things like that in there, but there's this large movement to make all children eligible for school meals. And I think there's 20 states who have passed it. And then there's some amount of states that are working to pass Healthy School Meals for All right now. And there is something in the Louisiana legislature around that. Okay. Whew. So now we're going to get, that was kind of like what's all of the Farm Bill, the big Farm Bill. Now we're going to get into a little bit more specifically about the nutrition program. But I'll pause to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, great. So the nutrition chapter and programs of the Farm Bill, as we said, affects millions of households. And it is expected to cost from 2023 to 2032, $1.223 trillion. The 2018 one, it was expected to be 400 and something billion. It ended up being 867 billion. And now we're looking at 1.223 trillion. So coming up, we're going to talk about what is in the chapter of the Farm Bill. Sorry, a bird just ran into my window. Some of the things that they're working on, like the Thrifty Food Plan. And then I was in DC earlier this month. And so what was learned about the Farm Bill, and actually all sorts of updates, because this week has been wildly busy with the Farm Bill. All right, so the biggest nutrition program in the Farm Bill is the SNAP program, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and that is mandatory spending. Some of the other large nutrition programs are what's called the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which is TFAP, and that is emergency food distribution, mainly through our food banking system. And in that one, the USDA provides 100% American-grown foods and administrative funds to states to operate what they call TFAP. So not only are they giving money, but they're also giving American-grown food, which is kind of, it crosses that line between a farmer program and a feeding program. The Commodity Supplemental Food Program, the CSFP, does very similar, and that is food boxes for seniors, 60 plus. They give both the food and the funding. So the government buys food from farmers that they then put into these emergency feeding programs. And then there's the Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations. And that again provides USDA foods to income eligible households living on Indian reservations and to Native American households residing in designated areas near reservations or in Oklahoma. And again, the USDA provides both food and funding. So that's another one that crosses farmer and feeding. And then some of the nutrition programs that are more of like grant programs is the Farmers Market Nutrition Program. And that provides vouchers or coupons to low-income senior and WIC eligible families to purchase fresh produce at farmers markets or farm stands. So here in New Orleans, the Crescent City Farmers Market has their FMNP program, and they actually do an FMNP match program. But you can sign up with, I think it's still Catholic Charities, seniors do, and they get a card, and there are specific farmers who are eligible, and they get $50 that they can spend with these farmers to get fresh produce for between July and November. Then there's the community food projects, food and nutrition, and those are competitive grants to nonprofits for programs that improve access to locally produced food for low-income households. There are some of FPAC's partners have a regional food system program grant, and that was paid for out of the community food projects grant. And so that is working to expand the amount of locally produced food to consumers. Then there is the Gus Schumacher Food Insecurity Nutrition Incentive Program, which is also known as either GusNIP or FENI. And those are grants that increase, basically they do a fruit and vegetable match program for SNAP. So right now, the Crescent City Farmers Market and lots of farmers markets around the state and around the country have funding so if someone goes to the market, swipes their SNAP card, they get the amount they put on their card, and they get that matched as well to purchase fruits and vegetables at the farmers markets. And this has been very well researched and widely known to be a very successful program. In this is also fruit and vegetable prescription program that's new in that area. So those were the programs that are all within the nutrition chapter. So you can see there's a lot in there that is for people, you know, in their everyday food. Then there is emergency food, and then there's these incentives and different programs that help get locally produced food into people's fridges and onto plates. So one big thing that is in this farm bill, or that was in the last farm bill and is continues, is the Thrifty Food Plan. And that's what the USDA uses to estimate the cost of a healthy diet for a family of 4. This is also how maximum SNAP allotments are determined. And they have 3 food plans. I'm going to hope I can remember them. There's the Thrifty Food Plan. There is the Low Cost Food Plan. And then there is a higher one that I can't think of right now.
There is low, moderate, and liberal.
Liberal, yes. Thank you. So the Thrifty Food Plan is the lowest, and it is updated not very often. It has only been updated 3 times since its conception in 1975. And I don't know about y'all, but my grocery bill has changed significantly since 1975. Well, I wasn't born then, but so in the 2018 Farm Bill, it was proposed that it was updated more frequently. The goal was to update it by 2022 and then every 5 years. It was updated in 2021, but people are asking for it to be updated more than 5 years. Even just since the 2018 one, I mean, we can think about how all of our grocery bills have changed in the last 2 years. And then some groups are also asking to move from the Thrifty to the Low Cost Food Plan. Okay, so the Farm Bill today. Y'all, it is messy and it is wild out there in Farm Bill town. This is just a list of all the things I've learned in the past like 3 weeks, because it is like massive Farm Bill time. So the buzz right now is budget neutral. And what that means is that whatever the Farm Bill is, it can't cost more. Like the Farm Bill can't cost more than it has cost in the past. It has to, the budget has to stay the same. The Congressional Budget Office just put out updated costs that said if everything is funded at the same level it is now, it will cost $1.5 trillion, which is the largest in history. 1.223 trillion of that is SNAP benefits. The House Appropriations just released their budget yesterday, and that brings the funding levels down to 2006 levels. I'm trying to find the link to drop it for you real quick. They were doing markup on the bill. I got it right here. This morning, I've not heard how that went yet. But it took out like millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for SNAP. It took out a lot of WIC. You can read in these press releases that I just put the link to, the spending levels that they have, or all the things that they have cut. One really interesting thing about this Farm Bill is that we have the debt ceiling negotiations. We have the larger budget negotiations, which is, so the larger budget says like how much can be spent overall, and the Farm Bill has to fit within that. And then the Farm Bill are all colliding. And the thing is, the Farm Bill is a bipartisan bill. One, it's a must-pass bill. It has to be passed no matter what. Two, it impacts all Americans. So if we're looking at like red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat, a lot of the more rural states tend to be more Republican. A lot of the more, I would say, or the thought is that the more urban states are more Democratic. Well, the Farm Bill, it reaches everyone. The farmers need support in the rural areas. People need support in cities. So it has to pass, and everyone wants to come out looking good in the Farm Bill. It just depends on what their focus is. So the debt ceiling negotiations are really putting a hurting on the Farm Bill, if you will, because they right now, I'm not sure if you all have heard, but they are trying to say that they will not increase the debt limit unless they make some cuts to programs, SNAP being one of the biggest ones. And how they want to cut SNAP is to make it harder to get it. So right now you have work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents, known as ABODs, that are for people aged 18 to 49. They want to increase those work requirements also for people aged 49 to 55, which would cut off millions of people from SNAP. They also want to tighten any sort of waivers for, sometimes you can get a waiver for the 3 months, or if you didn't turn something in on time, you can get a waiver. They want done away with that. So they're not cutting how much a family gets of SNAP, but they're making it harder for people to get SNAP in order to try to get the debt ceiling negotiations passed. The Senator Stabenow, who is the Senate chair, and this is kind of her legacy, she does not want, obviously, that to happen. And so the Farm Bill is being slowed down by these debt ceiling negotiations. Usually we would see a draft by now because it does expire in September. Because we have not, there is a good chance that we will need an extension. And what that means is that the things that are mandatory funding will continue to be funded at 2018 Farm Bill levels. Anything that is discretionary funding, unless they pass something extending it, those will cease to be funded. And so there is a whole list of things that we can send out, or we can put, when we put on the YouTube, that would be left out if it does need to have an extension, they don't extend the funding as well. They want very much for it not to go past 2023, but I've also heard that people are not willing to let SNAP be cut in order to pass the Farm Bill. So it's very much everybody's playing chicken, if you will. Fly-ins are beginning. Fly-ins are where a big group of people go to DC and they meet with policymakers to talk about what they want in the Farm Bill. Some FPAC staff will be traveling to DC in June to do a fly-in for hunger with one of our partners. And then FPAC and Sprout NOLA will be bringing 7 to 10 farmers from all around the state to DC also in June to talk with Louisiana lawmakers in DC to tell them what we need in a Farm Bill to help farmers. And again, I mentioned this already, but SNAP cuts do impact more than just SNAP. Free school meal eligibility is on the line. And there are other things that if you're eligible for SNAP, you are also eligible for this and that. And so changing SNAP will change those implications. So I did want to end with some more, some happier news. There's a lot of opportunities in the Farm Bill in nutrition. There's like I said, a big movement for healthy school meals for all. States are passing them at a rate that means that there could be momentum to pass it federally. There is a movement toward increased funding for those incentive programs like the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, because there's a lot of research that shows that not only do those help families, but they also help farmers. So that's kind of that across the aisle win-win. And then there's some opportunities for solidifying pandemic-related programs and the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, I say all of that, but that was all before this first budget came out. So things are moving really fast, and it's kind of fast and loose right now in Farm Bill world. And so it's a little bit of a wild card, but these in particular are things that have a lot of support behind them. And no matter how much policymakers want to save money, if their constituents really want something, at the end of the day, they are hopefully going to listen. So how to get involved? Keep an eye on marker bills. If you see something you like, reach out to your lawmaker. I also, Louisiana is lucky or uniquely positioned. We have Julia Letlow, who is on the Agriculture and Appropriations Committee. So she is in the room where it's happening, if you will, on the House side. So you can get in touch with her and let her know if you like what you see or you don't like what you see. I was trying to find the link for how to find your lawmakers, but we will send that out, or we'll put that in the chat for how to reach out to your DC lawmaker. But let them know how you feel about the Farm Bill. If you do not, thank you, Brandon. If you do not want to see SNAP cuts, let them know you don't want to see SNAP cuts. If you think that having healthy school meals for all is really important, give them a call or send them an email. The draft will be out, we hope, very soon. And then if you're not signed up for our newsletter, please sign up for that. And keep an eye out. We will be sending policy alerts and news as we find out about what is happening in the Farm Bill. This webinar was at a very interesting time. We did another one about agriculture in October and November, which was very different because things were not moving as quick. And so, I was changing these slides right up until like 12:55 with new information. So we're definitely in a period where things are happening. And so if this is something you want to get involved with more, please let us know and we will send you alerts. We will keep you posted on all the changes that are happening and that kind of thing. And I also wanted to say, if you feel disconnected from policy, it is for a reason. policy was set up to be confusing, to disempower people from trying to get involved. You feel disconnected because you have been disconnected, not because you don't know what's happening, not because it's too complicated for you to understand. And so it is time to recognize and take back, if it's even back, our power. Like, we are the people that vote folks in. We are the people who can tell our policymakers what we want and what we don't want to see. The thing about calling your policymakers or emailing them is that they have to keep a record of what people have emailed and called about. So if all of a sudden they get 25 people in one day calling and saying, hey, the thrifty food plan needs to be increased every year. They may not have been thinking about the thrifty food plan before that, but now they are. And when it comes up for a vote, they're thinking, man, I had 20 people calling me to say they think we should do that. And if they didn't have an opinion on it, suddenly they do. Or if they did have an opinion and it's different from what all the people have called about, they're going to think twice. And, they are easy to talk to. You just call, give them your zip code, and just say, one or two sentences about what you want. I think I'm not going to tell you what to say, but you can, tell them what you want, and then just say thank you. And that's all. And they will write it down. It's always a staffer. They're very, very nice. And that's it. And you can also email them, or they have portals. They will have a farm bill portal that should be opening soon. And every comment that's made in there is public comment, and they have to read those. And what's interesting, especially in the rulemaking phase, is that the USDA will propose something, and then they have to have a feedback period. So you give your feedback, you make public comment, they have to read those. And if they decide to do something that is different from what the majority of the comments have said, they have to justify that. They have to say, although the majority of people wanted this, we decided to do it this way. They can't just do it against what people wanted with no repercussions. So that's when it's really important to make your voice heard on how you want things to be rolled out, because they have to take what you say into account. And so does anyone have any questions? Let's see. Mary Louise asked, is the priority for comments at this point for House or Senate members? I would say for like today, it is for House members about the budget, and to, to let them know that a 2006 level budget in a 2023 year is not an appropriate level of funding, if that's how you feel. And I actually have in my email, some folks that you can email about that. I can actually, if you want me to forward you that email, put your email in the chat and I will get that to you, because I can't find it right now. Does anybody else have any questions? Was there anything that we left out or that you're just curious about? I'm going to stop the recording as we talk about questions.